So I just watched my family's old abandoned farm being explored by someone on TikTok, and they should not have gone. It's late and I'm doing my usual sitting in bed long past the time that I should be asleep. Mindlessly scrolling on TikTok, it's a bad habit, I know. I lazily flicked the last video away, which was a cat wearing a helmet fashioned out of a melon. And a live feed takes its place. It's dark with torches or headlamps, making almost a strobing effect in some crusty old building. Ghost hunters or something like that, not my thing. I raise my fingers to scroll again, but at the last second something catches my eye and stops me dead. The camera pans to a black and white framed photograph on the wall. And it's my grandparents on their wedding day. Sat stock still, watching intently as the camera moves forward. I would recognize that photo anywhere. Having examined it countless times as a child visiting their farmhouse. And it was my favorite picture hanging on their walls. This TikToker couldn't be at my grandparents' farm, surely. But it was true that it'd fallen into a state of despair after their passing. Abandoned Explorer 305, I take a mental note and click on their page and see where else they've been. But I can't bring myself to look away from this feed in case it disappears forever. Move further into the living room. A leather armchair well worn in its day, but now the cushions were sunken in and the fabric was torn beyond repair. The fireplace exposed stone and an enormous oak mantle. Once the impressive focal point of the room, now warped and cracked. And a lucky horseshoe hung dull and lifeless. The person holding the camera is speaking. And I'd hardly even noticed because I was so wrapped up in a cloud of nostalgia and outrage at this place being invaded. He's talking about the farm, saying that there's so many horseshoes around here. They're over the door threshold, there was one laid onto the kitchen floor, and these ones look like they were used to hang over the fireplace. Now I know this is a farm and they probably did have horses, but these are just everywhere. Now everyone knows that horseshoes are known as a good luck charm. But unless you're into folklore, you might not know that they're also good at warding off evil spirits. I roll my eyes, common knowledge. Another TikToker claiming to be an expert on the paranormal. This observation does send a small prickle down the back of my neck. There were a lot of horseshoes at the farm. I just go ahead and tuck that bit of knowledge away for future reference. Many years ago, they had a lot of horses, but since the advent of modern tractors and farming methods, they were just not needed. Neither Granny or Grandpa had any love for horses that I was aware of. But Granny was always a tad superstitious. Horseshoes, lucky feathers, four-leaf clovers, that sort of thing. For the most part, I loved going to stay at my grandparents' whenever I was small, apart from going to the bathroom alone. To a kid, this felt like an epic journey. Going up wasn't so bad, it was through a passageway, with all the sounds muffled by thick wood. But it was going back that was the problem. Since I was old enough to go to the bathroom unaccompanied, once I turned that corner and got to the top of the stairs, a feeling would hit. Like an icy finger in the small of your back. Run. Run down the stairs and back to the kitchen as quickly as my little legs could carry me. More than that, it was imperative that at no point did I turn around and look behind me. Bad things would happen if I looked back. As a child, I couldn't really express these feelings, but now I remember it. It felt like a creeping black mass seeping out of the walls of that back landing. And all it would take to give it a fleshly form would be a terrified look back from a fleeing child. In the live camera feed, they approached that solid oak door. It's hanging on one hinge, slightly ajar and swaying. The cameraman says aloud that there is a large cast iron horseshoe, big enough for a Shire horse, or a Clydesdale, nailed above the threshold that I don't remember. But suddenly, this feels important. I start to grip my phone with a clammy hand, positive that they shouldn't go further into the bowels of this house. I look at the comments flashing up. It's so creepy, seriously bad vibes. Did anyone else see a shadow? With a shaky hand, I start to type a comment telling them not to go in there. To just leave. In my peripheral vision as I'm typing, I can see the guy push open the door, which gives way with a creak. And just as I'm about to press send, I hear a sharp intake of breath. What the? I hear him whisper. I drop my phone onto the bed in shock. Standing side by side in the passageway are two gaunt figures dressed in nightgowns. They were wearing wide grins which stretched their papery gray skin. And where their eyes belonged were only dark pits. Somehow worse than that, Granny and Grandpa were holding hands. It was unmistakably them, despite their demonic manifestation. And though it was only a second, it felt like I stared into those twisted faces for half an eternity. All hell breaks loose on camera. Abandoned Explorer 305 turns his heels and runs back the way he came. The camera work falls into disarray as he heads towards the exit. But I swear in that fraction of a second as his phone whips around, the creepily wide grins on their faces twist into grisly snarls. I'm focused on my phone screen, listening to the TikTok guy's heavy breathing and watching the torch flit around on screen, lighting up the walls and floors at random as he makes a break for it. He's close to the back door as long as he doesn't turn the wrong way. 5 or 6 more paces and he'll be out. Shockingly loud on the little phone speakers, an ungodly screech which makes me jump about a foot off my bed. Live has ended. Feed had just gone. I tap the screen and nothing. Did he make it out? I search for his handle on the app and nothing comes up. I sit for a long time just staring into space, heart thumping. I should have commented sooner. I should have realized where he was at. Maybe that would have stopped it from going any further. A notification pops up on my phone, a direct message from TikTok. And strangely, there's no account name on the message. Come to us. Very direct, no ambiguity there. I sigh and reach for a notebook from my bedside table. To cross the last attempt off the list. Communication with the undead via the internet is a new development. An extra deep grave didn't do the trick. Rocks in their mouths, black salt, holy water from the lords. A stake through the heart, nothing keeps these two restless souls in their grave for long. We don't know if it's the land itself, a curse upon the family, or something else. Did they see that thing I was so afraid of as a kid? Was that the reason, or a symptom? I glanced down the list of things yet to try. Up next, decapitation of the corpses. I don't relish at the thought of that one. I fire off a quick text to my brother. Trouble at mill. That's the code for get your shovel. We're off to dig up old Granny and Grandpa again to see if we can finally get them to rest in peace like you're supposed to. The problem is that each time we try to end this and fail, every time they come back more and more changed than before. The last time they climbed out of the grave, they looked like themselves, only dead. Upsetting, but to be expected. The nightmarish figures that I had seen tonight were a world away from that. I worry about giving them power, feeding them somehow. But we can't just let them roam free, especially when other people get caught in the crossfire. I think this is going to require some outside help. So what do you guys think of that story? So I think someone else might be living my life. I don't really know where else I can try to explain this. I feel like I'm going crazy or maybe losing my mind and memory too. And no, dementia does not run in my family, but I'm a 32-year-old female and I've had multiple instances where people tell me they've talked to me when I can't remember that ever happening. At first, my 35-year-old husband thought I was just forgetting the little things. It started with one of the other moms in the neighborhood asking why I didn't bring any cups or napkins for the monthly get-together. And I told her that I didn't know I was supposed to bring cups. My husband had just told me to bring sodas, and we did. But she said that we had seen each other at the grocery store and she had mentioned it to me, but honestly, I don't remember that conversation at all. My husband and I both apologized, and we just figured that I didn't listen well enough and it was my own fault. People forget things. Then at work, I'm a teacher, one of my students asked why there weren't any pizzas when the class arrived for 4th period. I thought he was just being silly, but then the whole class started to get antsy as I started the lesson. So I asked them why they weren't paying attention, and they let me know that on Monday I had promised a pizza party for them on Friday if they all turned in their notebooks, which they did. Now here's the kicker. On Monday, I missed my 4th and 5th period. There was a coffee spill in the teacher's lounge while I had to run home and change my clothes. So the principal sent in a substitute for me. I told my students that it must have been the substitute who promised them this. But the students swore up and down it was me, and this seemed to really upset them. More situations like this started to happen, and I didn't really take it too seriously until it started getting weirder. I got into an argument with my husband after he was complaining about the cold water and saying that I used up all the hot water when I was going to shower in the morning. Next morning I came downstairs to a hot pot of coffee waiting for me. I'm the only one in the house that drinks coffee, definitely not my 5-year-old son or my husband. I also saw my exact breakfast that I eat every day sitting next to my nightstand half eaten. When I came home one day, my husband was complaining about there being cold water. And he let me know that I used up all the hot water even though I was planning on taking my shower that morning. This caused an entire argument between us, and then a few more things happened throughout our home. I had to be losing my memory. I started to write down my daily activities so I could keep better track of everything. But 2 weeks ago, everything changed when my husband came home while I was watching TV and said, "You guys are back already?" Apparently, I had told him that I had taken our 5-year-old son to the park and he was nowhere to be found. My blood turned completely cold because I knew my son had been napping in there just an hour before. My husband and I were screaming and crying looking for our child. My husband said in a panicked voice that maybe Charlie had went to the park without me. The park was only a 10-minute walk from our house, so it wasn't impossible. I ran to the park and I started to cry even harder whenever I saw Charlie trying to take his turn on the slide. My husband quickly grabbed him and asked why he would go to the park by himself. And he said that he didn't, that mommy had taken him to the park. I let him know that no, I just put him down for a nap. That's when Charlie said that he was going to sleep, but I came back into the room and walked him to the park. I guess a neighbor overheard and walked over to even confirm the story, stating that because of seeing me, he decided to bring his girls over and we even chatted on the bench for a little bit. And this was the first time that I had the thought that someone else might be pretending to be me. And if that wasn't scary enough, it means whoever it was in my house with my son and had taken my son. Later, I ended up opening up and telling my husband about some of these concerns, and that's when he let me know that some of his friends had even seen me at a bar recently being flirty with other people, which is completely false because I've been sober for the past 9 years. The next day, he installed cameras in the house, and I was obsessed the second that I had access to the footage. I basically stayed in my room for 3 days, missing work and barely seeing anything on footage except for my husband. So on day 4, I finally showered and got ready for work. I kissed my husband goodbye and I left and didn't get back till around 6:30. Charlie was watching TV and having a snack, and I asked him where Daddy was, and he says that he was upstairs. So I went up to our room upstairs, wondering why he had left Charlie downstairs all alone. I mean, he's fine, but he's still 5 years old. I opened the door to see my husband naked on the bed with a smile on his face and his eyes closed. I asked him what was with the birthday suit, and he just looked at me and smiled like I was supposed to know. He stated, "Why did you get dressed? Are we going somewhere?" I was like, "I just got home." My husband sat up a little bit straighter and was like, "No, you've been home since 4. My husband let me know that I got home at 4, apologized for being so paranoid lately. I put our son in front of the TV to watch cartoons, and I started messing around with my husband. This made me completely lightheaded because I hadn't gotten home until 6:30. My whole body started to burn. I felt lightheaded and like I couldn't breathe. He said that I had told him that I needed to freshen up in the bathroom about 15 minutes ago. Swung open the door to the bathroom and it was empty. But things in the restroom had been used, and when my husband got a closer look at the window, one of the panels felt loose. This is when I decided to watch the footage, and it was horrible. I saw her touch and snuggle with my son and touch and snuggle with my husband. But the biggest problem is that I couldn't find anything in the footage to show that it wasn't me. She used the exact mannerisms, comforted my son in the exact way that I do. Body, my voice. So this week I decided not to leave the house at all. My husband said that he doesn't even feel safe and always looks over his shoulder whenever he leaves the house. I tried filing a police report, but the lack of evidence didn't really do much. Took the footage and our statements, and we haven't really heard back. And I wouldn't be surprised if they thought it was a joke since the woman looks just like me. So the next day, while my husband was at work, I was downstairs on the couch lesson planning for the substitute teacher because I was basically never coming back. I just keep feeling like she's gonna do something sinister now that she knows for certain that I know about her. Well, Charlie came running downstairs with a big smile on his face, and I smiled back at him, and he immediately froze. The joy on his face went into confusion when he asked, "How did you beat me?" I asked him what he meant, and he said, "We were playing upstairs and you told me that I could get a juice. How did you beat me here?" I felt something in my throat and like gravity stopped working. I asked Charlie to come sit with me, and he bundled over. I typed this out super fast, so ignore any mistakes. I wanted to flee and call 911, but my purse is upstairs and my keys are inside. I can hear her now. She's calling for Charlie, asking him to come back upstairs. She sounds just like me, and I'm terrified. Let me know what story from Reddit you want to hear next.